Have all members registered?
No, not the Democrats. The size of this gavel.
Members, a quorum is not present.
What did Democrats do in California? They hijacked and corrupted that process, and they gerrymandered California districts to steal 12 House seats.
That's a lot.
Where I was in London at the time with the Judiciary Committee, and it is very...
What were you doing in London with the Judiciary Committee, Jasmine, in London? Are you a representative of London? A civil war brewing over redistricting. That's according to Governor Hochul out of New York, who said this is war. All's fair in love and war. And if we have to defend our fleeing cowardly Democrats from Texas, they'll do it in New York because that's their New York values up there in Hochulville. So here is what Greg Abbott said. Now we've got a message from Greg Abbott. He said, you better be back here, okay, lunatic Democrats, by 3 p.m. on Monday, August 4th. That's today. If you're not here by 3 p.m., you're grounded in the form of you lose your congressional position. You're no longer in the legislature. You're in big trouble. Now what happened today, of course, is the Democrats didn't show up. And we're going to see what this gavel sounded like from this fella who is very perturbed about their absconsion and abandonment of their own duties. We also have another message from Ken Paxton, who was responding to this saying, it's time to conduct some arrests. And so we'll go through it. Real Texans do not run from a fight, but that's exactly what most of the Texas House Democrats just did, punks. Rather than doing their job and voting on urgent legislation affecting the lives of all Texans, they have fled Texas to deprive the House of the quorum necessary to conduct the business. Now, these absences are not merely unintended and unavoidable interruptions in public service, like a sudden illness or a family emergency might be. Instead, these absences were premeditated for an illegitimate purpose, what one representative called breaking quorum. This is like an insurrection by these guys. Another previously signaled that Democrats would have to go by an extreme measure of a quorum break, they wrote, to stop these bills from happening. In other words, Democrats hatched a deliberate plan not to show up for work for the specific purpose of abdicating the duties of their office and thwarting the chamber's business. Now that amounts, writes Governor Abbott, to abandonment or forfeiture of an elected state office. When the governor calls a special session, writes Abbott, our Constitution provides that the legislature shall meet under Texas Constitution, Article 3, Section 5. It's not optional, all right? It's a duty. The absconded Democrat House members were elected. This is their job, to meet and vote on legislation, not to prevent votes that may not go their way. Every session, legislators on both sides of the aisle find themselves on the losing side of a legislative vote. And every session, most of those legislators find a way to disagree agreeably and behave like adults rather than going AWOL away without leave. But Abbott said, you guys have one option here. This truancy ends now. The derelict House members must return to Texas and be in attendance when the House convenes at 3 p.m. on Monday, today, August 4th. For any member who fails to do so, this is a warning for you, I will invoke Texas Attorney General Opinion KPO 382, which we have, to remove the missing Democrats from membership in the Texas House. In that opinion, the AG considered whether Texas law allows for a determination that a legislator has vacated office if they intentionally break quorum. Now, the AG concluded that, quote, whether a specific legislator abandoned his or her office such that a vacancy occurred will be a fact question for a court. And he further concluded that through a quo warranto action, a district court may determine that a legislator has forfeited his or her office due to abandonment and can remove that said legislator from office afuera them, right on out of there. Creating a vacancy that empowers me to swiftly fill those vacancies under the law and Texas Constitution. Now, in addition to abandoning their offices, these legislators may have also committed felonies. Many absentee Democrats are soliciting funds, taking a bunch of money to evade the fines, flying on private jets too. Who's paid for all these flights? Any Democrat who solicits, accepts, or agrees to accept such funds to assist in the violation of the legislative duties, all for skipping a vote so you can have mojitos with gangbangers and Senator Von Hollen on J.B. Pritzker's giant bosom, you are violating bribery laws. The same could be true for any person who offers or gives them their giant bosom, Pritzker. I will use my full extradition authority to demand the return of any out-of-state felons and to stop Pritzker's bosom. All right, so Greg Abbott is sending that in. Now, that was pretty clear. Get your butts back in here by 3 p.m. or else. Well, guess what? The clock tolls for thee, Democrats.
Clerk, ring the bell. Have all members registered?
No, not the Democrats. The size of this gavel.
Members, a quorum is not present. The roll has been called,
Arrest
and a
them.
quorum has not been established. Let me begin by commending the members who did show up. Those who answered the call, honored their oath, and came here ready to work for the people of Texas.
Thank you.
Your presence speaks volumes. You understand that the issues before us, disaster recovery, fighting for the families who lost loved ones in the floods, human trafficking, and more, are not abstract policy debates. They are real-world problems demanding immediate solutions. But instead of confronting those challenges, some of our colleagues have fled the state in their duty. They've left the state, abandoned their posts, and turned their backs on the constituents they swore to represent. They've shirked their responsibilities under the direction and pressure of out-of-state politicians and activists who don't know the first thing about what's right for Texas. To be absolutely clear, leaving the state does not stop this House from doing its work. It only delays it. And every day this chamber is unable to act, the cost grows. In response to this dereliction of duty and pursuant to the rules of the House, I am prepared to recognize a motion to place a call on the House and any other motions necessary to compel the return of absent members. Should such a motion prevail, I will immediately sign the warrants for the civil arrest of the members who have said they will not be here.
Go
As
get
Speaker,
'em!
I will do everything in my power to establish quorum and move this body forward by any and all means available to this office. To those who are absent, return now. Show the courage to face the issues you were elected to solve. Come back and fulfill your duty, because this House will not sit quietly while you obstruct the work of the people. The people of Texas are watching, and so is the nation. And if you choose to continue down this road, you should know there will be consequences.
So get your
Members-
butts back to Texas and do your jobs, or else there will be consequences. Here's what Ken Paxton had to say about it. All right, Attorney General Paxton issued the following statement in response to the radical Democrat members of the Texas House of Representatives who fled the state to break quorum. Instead of showing up to work and doing the jobs they were elected to do, House Democrat members have fled the state in a cowardly desertion of their responsibilities as elected officials. These jet-setting runaways abandoned Texas, abdicated their duties in the House, and sacrificed their constituents for a publicity stunt, said Paxton. All true. I am prepared to do everything in my power to hold them accountable, because these liberal lawmakers are not above the law. It's imperative that they be swiftly arrested, punished, and face the full force of the law for turning their backs on the people of Texas. In 2021, Attorney General Paxton's office successfully secured a Texas Supreme Court ruling that held that the House could arrest absent members to secure their presence and establish a quorum. That ruling helped create the current legal framework, which allows for rogue lawmakers to be found, arrested, and brought back to the Capitol. Attorney General Paxton will continue to use every legal tool at his disposal to enforce the law and stop the radical lawmakers from ignoring their duty to the people of Texas and breaking quorum. You want to read the case? Take a look at it, which I do believe that we have. So we'll go through them now. We also see this came out from Briscoe Kane, and he's a dad over who is a state representative there in Texas, and he posted this today. He says, "I just signed a motion to put a call on the House, which is the first step before issuing the warrants to bring the Democrats back to Texas." Nice! Good looking signing right there, sir. We appreciate it. Go get him. All right, so here is Greg Abbott. He came out and talked to Fox about this today. Here's what the governor had to say.
Greg Abbott joins us now. Thank you so much. Can you tell us from your perspective, what is the issue? Why did they leave?
So they're leaving, and they've left because they're very un-Texan. Texans don't run from a fight. And there's a fight going on in the legislature right now about redistricting as well as other things. I'll make 2 quick points, Dana, about this. For one, to run to states like New York and Illinois to protest redistricting is kind of like running to Wisconsin to protest cheese. It's just kind of outrageous. Those are New York and Illinois, 2 hallmark states that have already done redistricting to eliminate Republicans. But the second thing is far more serious, and that is what these Democrats have done. Just a small fraction of them were needed to break a quorum, and that small fraction is holding hostage legislation in the state of Texas where we will be able to provide assistance and reform for all of the victims of that horrific flooding that we've had in the state of Texas. Our fellow Texans are being let down and not getting the flood relief they need because these Democrats have absconded from the responsibility, and I believe they have forfeited their seats in the state legislature because they're not doing the job they were elected to do.
Democrats, typical, abandoning their constituents to go pal around on private jets with Pritzker and Hochul. Oh, now here was Hochul. She's very unhappy about this. She says New York is going to strike back, and she's using some pretty aggressive language here between this clip and this clip. In fact, this one, she says it's a a war. We remember what happened when Joe Biden came out with his Gates of Hell speech, screaming at everybody. MAGA! Winter, misery, death. Ah. Remember all that insanity? Well, she's also insane. Here's what she sounds like from New York.
Who don't care, will not invest their heart and soul into this battle. This is a war. We are at war. And that's why the gloves are off, and I say, bring it on.
The gloves are off. Didn't they say Trump was an insurrectionist because he said fight like hell, even though that's what the Democrats say all the time? Fight like hell, fight like hell, fight like hell. They're like, that's an insurrectionary coded language for white supremacist neo-Nazis. What are you talking about, weird people? But anyways, Hochul is out. She also shared this little exchange, and they're very unhappy about this. They're like, how dare you do what we do to you? They're like, if we want to kick you in the nads every day as much as we want, we're allowed to do that. We know it's dishonorable. We know it's not the right thing to do, but we're allowed to do it because we're just, hacks and we have no integrity and we want all the rules written for ourselves. And we can just continue to do that. And then when we wise up, put a cup on and start kicking him in the nads back and practicing our swings, well, then they start crying from the rooftops. How dare you do this? You can't kick us. We don't even have any nads anymore anyway, so you can't kick anyways. But stop, it's still in my patriarchy. Relax, all right? And here is she now. She's coming back. They're so mad about this. Here is what Hochul said.
While Donald Trump and his co-conspirator, Greg Abbott, erode our democracy and drag us toward authoritarianism.
Spit it out, Hochul.
Now, what Texas and Republican states are doing at the direction of Donald Trump, I say is nothing short of a legal insurrection against our capital. Legal meaning they're using the legal process. Does not mean it's legal, and it must be stopped. If Republicans are willing to rewrite these rules to give themselves an advantage, then they're leaving us no choice. We must do the same. There's a phrase, you have to fight fire with fire.
Oh!
That is a true statement of how we're feeling right now. And as I've said, another overused but applicable phrase.
What?
All's fair in love and war.
War. Oh, we know you can't say those types of words. You get indicted for those words. You have to defend yourself against prison from special counsels and multiple lunatics who say that you try to overthrow democracy, and they have a whole select committee about it because that's how insane they are. So this is about just general redistricting, right? It's not that big of a deal. Just relax. It's the greatest threat to our democracy since we know the Civil War. We got it. So it's just the nonstop thing with them. All right, anyways, moving on. So sign language, great job to that dude. He did a great job on that. And you can see there were more. This fella is over running for governor of California. And here's what he had to say in response, because now we have this little situation brewing where all the states are jockeying over each other to see who can redistrict each other harder. And the Democrats have been redistricting their whole constituencies hard for years. They're big fans of it. And so now the Republicans are like, all right, we're gonna do a little redistricting ourselves. And they just have a meltdown. So here is what this California gubernatorial candidate had to say about this entire battle.
Well, it's hilarious, Harris, to see these Democrats talking about moral clarity and rigging the system, because all of this
He's running for governor? He sounds British.
Unfairness was actually started by Democrats, and it was started by Democrats right here in California.
That's true.
People say that when you see this playing out between the states, it's a tit for tat. If Texas moves first, then Illinois and California will respond and so on. No, it was California that started this. In 2008, the people of California voted for an independent commission to draw the legislative districts. What did Democrats do in California? They hijacked and corrupted that process, and they gerrymandered California districts to steal 12 House seats
from
Republicans. That's what started all this. That's what made it not a level playing field. And so when Gavin Newsom, who's now saying that if Texas goes ahead, he's going to call a special election to overturn the California Constitution to steal another 5 House seats from Republicans, I'm saying no to that. I've been in conversation with my lawyers all weekend. We've got the legal basis now, and we're going to be announcing this tomorrow to stop Gavin Newsom if he tries to go ahead with his further gerrymandering of the district. So we've got to realize who started this. It was Democrats.
It's right. Exactly right. That's a very nice, eloquent explanation of how all this began. Thank you, Steve Hilton, for that. Learning more about this fella. Must be from England, who can run California much better than it sounds like any Californians can. So we'll keep our eye on that one. But here was the actual order that was referenced. So diving in, can we actually arrest these Democrat fleeing cowards? That's the question. And we saw that Governor Abbott referenced this document, KP0382, which is here. And what this is a memo. Comes over from Ken Paxton. And Ken Paxton is going to detail what his interpretation of the law is. Can we arrest these people? Answer from Ken. Now, this is an old one, right? It's over from 2021, but that's how this stuff works. This is the precedent. It was decided back then. And so he says that we've already analyzed this. Here's our decision. So we don't need to do it again. The law says we can do it. We're just reminding reminding you about this memo. Now, here is the response. Now, you asked two questions. Does a legislator, like one of these fleeing coward Democrats, have a constitutional right to break quorum? And question, does Texas law allow for a determination that that office has been vacated? Now, your questions arose in the context of a session back in 2021. And so that's supposed to look into this. What does this work? Because the Democrats did it again. The governor identified multiple subjects for the legislature to consider. And then back in 2021, numerous legislators left the state and they wanted to deprive Texas of a quorum back then. And they prohibited any legislation from getting passed or gone. The legislators stated they would not return to Texas until the 30-day special session ended. As a result, the legislature didn't do anything. The governor convened a second session, and that is still in progress at the time of the writing back then. Now, here's the analysis. A public body, including a legislature like this House, must have a quorum present to conduct its business. Now, that generally a majority of the members is fixed by statute, unless laws say otherwise. But in Texas, the Constitution says 2/3 of each house shall constitute a quorum to do business. Therefore, according to this time, we had 100 people who needed to be there. So question, does a legislator have a constitutional right to break quorum? So they say it is the policy of this office to refrain from issuing an AG opinion on questions that we know to be the subject of litigation. But this policy has been in effect for more than 60 years and is based upon the fact that AG opinions, unlike those are issued by courts of law, are advisory in nature. And so by contrast, court decisions are binding unless they've been modified or overturned. And so consequently, when a legal matter is being litigated, the courts are generally appropriate for resolving these. And so we declined to issue an opinion in response to your first question, but you can look over here and say, so we can't give you a clear answer on the Constitution, but another judge kind of said that we could prosecute them. But said here, now Texas courts do recognize a different part of the law says we got an answer to your second question. In your second question, you ask whether Texas law allows for a determination that the office has been vacated. Both the Texas Constitution and the Election Code, they do establish that timing of a vacancy occurs when we have a couple things: death, resignation, removal, take another office, declared ineligible, create a new office, dies, declines to assume office is another concept. However, we find no constitutional provision or statute that establishes an exhaustive list for why a vacancy occurs. And so therefore, we can look to the courts and see what they say about it. So there's just kind of like some guidelines, but we don't have anything that says this is this and this is not. The Texas court has long recognized that a vacancy can come about in a number of different ways. And one case back in 1873 said that abandonment of an office is a species of resignation. You just didn't show up, basically resigned. And so that's what we think is appropriate. Whether a specific legislator has abandoned is a question of fact. And so we can't get into the facts right now, obviously, it would be on a case-by-case basis. But here, in general, abandonment might have a basis for it under Texas law. In fact, 1920, another case supports it. Now, Texas law also says you can remove somebody from a public officer, saying here, vacancy occurs on the date of the judgment and when the judgment of removal becomes final. And so, in summary, Texas courts recognize that a vacancy may occur by abandonment. If you just want to go hang out with Pritzker's teats, then you can. But whether a specific legislator abandoned his office will be a question of fact. And through a quo warranto action, a district court may determine a legislature is gone and abandoned and create a vacancy, signed by Ken Paxton. And his analysis, as we mentioned, was based on this, which was also flagged for us this morning by another attorney, I think out in Texas, said, hey, this is what the Supreme Court of Texas got back then. And this is an older case back in 2021 that Paxton was just referencing. He says, 2/3 of each house shall constitute a quorum to do business, but a smaller number may adjourn from day to day and compel the attendance of absent members in such a manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. More background. Now, the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are members of the Texas House who denied a House quorum. They fled back in July 21, because that's just what they do. Nor is the question whether the proposed legislation is desirable. Those are political questions far outside the scope of judicial function. Okay, we don't set policy. It's just a legal question, and it concerns only this: do they have the authority to physically compel the attendance of the members? And the Supreme Court in Texas says we conclude that it does. They can go make these arrests. And so we therefore direct the district court to withdraw the TRO and allow it to go on. If the record establishes that they cannot show a probable right of relief, then they're not entitled to a TRO. The law says they can be arrested. So why are you stopping them from being arrested? The district court, the lower level court, concluded that they satisfied that. They said, well, the court finds that it clearly appears appears that the Texan government, the governor, have erroneously interpreted Texas laws, saying that they think that they have the power to detain, confine, and others if they don't show up for a quorum. But the Supreme Court of Texas, right, says here that we disagree with that decision. After examining the text and the history of Article 3, Section 10 of the Texas Constitution and another case law, we conclude that the provision means just what it says. The Constitution empowers the House to, quote, compel the attendance of absent members and authorizes the House to do so in such a manner and under such penalties as the House may provide. And so therefore, under the Constitution and the uniform understanding of the provision, including around the time of the enactment in our state's history, it has always been that it confers on the legislature the power to physically compel the attendance of absent members in order to achieve a quorum. So their new interpretation, this is back in 21, the whining legislators back then were abandoning, and they said under this case that they could compel right now the attendance of the absent members. It's only about persuasion is their interpretation and dialogue, but it's not about true compulsion. Saying, well, they say that they can like bring them and like confine them, but it's just like talk a big game kind of a thing. That is simply not what the Constitution says. Adopting a view of Article 3 of the Constitution of Texas in your interpretation would abuse what it's intended to do, and we're not going to do that. And so, as explained, you don't have any right to relief, and so as a result, the lower level district court abused its discretion. They should not have granted the TRO, and that district court must now resolve the TRO, and the people can be arrested according to the Supreme Court of Texas. Now, what happened after that is they resolved it, I believe, but this is an old 2021 case, so the arrests weren't necessary, but maybe this time they will be. And so here is what one Texas representative had to say, saying this country is in big trouble unless she runs everything.
Yeah, I don't know where we're going, but right now, all I know is that we've got to do everything that we can to save this country, because right now it feels like we're going to hell, and it doesn't seem like we have a way back. You know, I actually had to leave a congressional delegation trip where I was in London at the time with the Judiciary Committee, and it is very...
What were you doing in London with the Judiciary Committee, Jasmine, in London? Are you a representative of London?
Very frightening to see how much influence this terrible regime is having, not just in this country, but on other countries. It is also terrible that our friends don't know if we can be good friends. We know that Canada is upset with us. We know that Mexico is upset with us.
All right, well, I saw the Canadian Prime Minister out in the streets over the weekend with some dude in a thong up his butt, just loving on him like it's just Normalville up there. So anyways, those might be Jasmine's friends, but she can enjoy. Now, we also saw, here are more Democrats. This is Christian Collins. This dude is flying on these private jets. He's like, yeah, power, something. Let the people vote. Then he gets on a chartered private jet somewhere that has a private walkway and a folding table pop-up right there. He says, we're going to go fight for the people. Texas Democrats, climate change is real. Climate change is real. Climate change is real. Then hops on a private jet to get out of there because he doesn't want to do his job. Get back to work, man. All right, so here's another one who's hopping aboard this private jet. They're all super happy about it. They're like thrilled. Like, this is crazy. This is so fun. We're going to get drinks before we take off. She's posted, Cheryl Cole, I'm heading to Chicago right now to stop this rigged redistricting process. We can't allow Trump and Greg Abbott to steal power from the people. With these maps, we're continuing to hold the line and fly on private jets to Pritzker's mansions. Now, Hakeem was also talking about it. He says the Democrats are doing a great job down there. We're going to fight for these seats. We also saw that they're actually saying that this is a crime. Trump wants to commit yet another crime, said Craig Kazar. This is a crime for the Texas legislature to modify according to their own rules. All right, so they've just lost it, essentially. But here is this fella. He's another individual in the Texas State House, and he's explaining what he's seeing from his end.
The United States Constitution and the Constitution of the great state of Texas absolutely allows us to undergo this type of redistricting effort. So we're doing something that's completely legal, it's completely constitutional, and I'm doing everything I can in my power as an elected member of the state of Texas to make sure that the state of Texas does everything in its power to make sure that Republicans hold on to a majority in the United States Congress. It's as simple as that. That's completely legal. It's totally permissible. The United States Supreme Court has said so on multiple occasions. We should have, quite frankly, we should have done this during the regular session and had this in the rearview mirror by now.
So they are working hard in there to get the Democrats back in. And here was Senator Tom Cotton explaining his take on what's happening in Texas from his position over in the Senate.
Sandra, as we've seen in the past, the Democrats have tried to do this in Texas over voting changes or over redistricting about 20 years ago. And in the end, they end up losing. Governor Abbott can call another special session. They just don't have the votes to stop this because Democrats Democrats aren't popular in Texas, but I find it deeply ironic that Democrats are fleeing Texas over gerrymandering to New York and Massachusetts and Illinois. New York just tried to do a mid-decade redistricting. Massachusetts has a horrible gerrymander. Republicans there typically get 35 to 40% of the vote, sometimes even more. They don't have a single member of Congress. And Illinois' congressional map, I would compare to the scribblings of a small child, but it would be unfair to small children. It is a horrific gerrymander. So it's rich the Democrats have fled Texas to these deeply Democratic states with terrible gerrymanders.
Yeah, and I guess they're going to work harder. They're going to gerrymander even harder in some of these blue places and make it really hurt. So, all right, fine. Let's go. You want to play that game? That's fine. We're in favor of using the Democrats' tactics against them. If they're going to use it against America, then the Republicans, unless they want to get blown out again after the Trump era is over, then they'll learn how to fight and use the same tools the Democrats are using. And then if they don't want those tools to be used, they have to make sure that they act with haste and act with uniformity to make these measures pass permanently so the Democrats can't regain control and reclaim their foothold.